Part 1. The Dinner.
It was a crisp Sunday evening when Helen pulled into the driveway of her eldest son James's home. She had spent her entire life devoted to her children, raising them, nurturing them, sacrificing her own dreams and ambitions. Every scraped knee, every late-night homework session, every bedtime story, every school event, it had all been for them.
She adjusted her scarf and rang the doorbell. James answered with a polite smile. "Mom, glad you could make it," he said. "Of course, James. Thank you for inviting me," Helen replied, her smile polite but tight. Inside, the warmth of the house could not mask the chill in the air. Lauren, James's wife, gave a faint, amused smirk. Across the table, Sophie and Ethan exchanged subtle, condescending glances. Helen felt the familiar ache of invisibility and disappointment. Dinner began politely, but the barbs soon followed. "You always did love to keep things simple, Mom," Sophie said, her tone sharp. "Even your clothes, very practical." Helen forced a smile. "I suppose I do," she said quietly. When she accidentally spilled a little wine on the tablecloth, Lauren quipped, "Typical Mom." Everyone laughed. James said nothing. Helen's lips pressed together. Inside, a fire ignited. Years of devotion, of giving everything for these children, only to be treated with ridicule. Part 2. The Humiliation. After dinner, Helen drove home alone. The streets were quiet, the night air crisp and still. Her mind replayed the evening, the snide remarks, the laughter at her expense, the lack of acknowledgement for everything she had sacrificed. "They think I am powerless," she thought, "that I exist only to serve them, to be mocked at their convenience. Let them be wrong." Part 0. Before the Children. Long before Helen became a mother, her life was full of ambition, dreams, and hard work. Together with her husband, she had poured endless hours into building a small but promising company. Nights were spent in the office, mornings filled with meetings and negotiations, and every spare moment devoted to planning the future. Helen thrived in this world. She loved the challenge of making the business succeed, of solving problems, and of seeing tangible results from her efforts. Yet alongside the satisfaction came exhaustion. There were months when the business barely survived, when every decision felt like walking on a tightrope. When Helen became pregnant with her first child, everything shifted. The company still needed her attention, but she now carried the responsibility for a new life. She and her husband had to find a balance, but soon Helen's energy was divided in ways she had never imagined. As each child was born, Helen's world transformed. She stopped working late nights, paused important projects, and devoted herself entirely to her children. Her business dreams were set aside, her own ambitions put on hold, and she threw herself into motherhood with complete devotion. She learned how to soothe cries at midnight, prepare school lunches, manage homework schedules, and be the emotional anchor for her children. Her world became defined by their needs. Every decision she made was filtered through their well-being. Years passed. The children grew, and Helen's sacrifices were endless. Yet, despite all her efforts, her devotion was often met with entitlement, impatience, and sometimes unkindness. She realized that her love and sacrifices did not guarantee respect or gratitude. Part 3. The Secret Power. The morning after her humiliating dinner, Helen returned to the family company. The office smelled faintly of polished wood and paper, a familiar comfort. She walked through the empty halls, noting the outdated systems and the complacency of employees who assumed leadership was absent. She took control quietly, reorganizing departments, modernizing operations, and implementing strategies to expand the business. Every decision she made was precise, calculated, and deliberate. Helen spent hours reviewing contracts, reaching out to clients, and studying market trends. She immersed herself in the company, remembering how she and her husband had once struggled to make it thrive, long before the children came. Those memories gave her both strength and clarity. She knew she could rebuild it even better than before. Part 4: Daily Life and Transformation. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Helen's daily routine became a balance of strategy, reflection, and self-improvement. She woke early, reviewed reports, and attended meetings with renewed authority. Afternoons were for mentoring staff and exploring creative solutions. Evenings were dedicated to self-care, long walks, exercise, and reading books on leadership, psychology, and negotiation. She experimented with fashion and presence, cultivating an elegance and confidence that matched her growing power. No longer invisible, she began to radiate quiet authority that commanded respect. Helen reflected on her love before the children when she and her husband had built the company from the ground up. Parenthood had shifted her focus entirely, but now, with the children grown, she reclaimed her own life and vision. Part 5: Success. By the end of the year, Helen's influence over the company was undeniable. She had secured high-profile clients, orchestrated major deals, and implemented modern systems that made the business more efficient and profitable than ever. Her children began to hear whispers, rumors of a formidable woman leading the family business. None suspected it was Helen. Each story that reached them fueled her quiet satisfaction. Helen's transformation extended beyond business. She attended social events, cultivated a network of influential people, and embraced her personal ambitions. She was no longer defined by motherhood alone. She had become a woman of power, confidence, and vision. Part 6: The Revenge. 1 year later, Helen received an invitation to another family dinner, this time at Sophie's home. She dressed with care, choosing a tailored dress that conveyed elegance, poise, and strength. She wore it with subtle confidence, a reflection of the woman she had become. Upon entering, her children were stunned. The woman they had belittled, mocked, and underestimated now commanded attention with her presence. Helen's calm, composed smile unnerved them, yet she radiated warmth without apology. As dinner conversation turned toward the company, Helen spoke clearly and deliberately. "I've been managing the company for the past year," she said. "I hold the majority shares and have overseen its growth. The business is thriving under my leadership." Shock rippled across the table. James, Sophie, and Ethan exchanged stunned glances. Attempts to belittle her fell flat. Helen's smile widened subtly, letting the moment sink in. "You always thought I hadn't achieved anything. Yet here I am," she added, calm and resolute. Part 7: Vindication and Freedom. After the dinner, Helen walked home alone under the streetlights. The crisp night air brushed her face. Triumph and liberation mingled in her heart. She reflected on her journey, the years of devotion, the sacrifices, the pain, and the injustice. She realized her worth had never been defined by her children's approval, but by her own vision, intelligence, and persistence. Helen smiled, walking with her head held high. She was finally free, respected, powerful, and proud of the woman she had become. Part 8. Reflection and Hope. Later that night, Helen sat by the window in her home, looking at the city lights. The journey had been long and difficult, but she finally understood something profound. Her life was hers to live, her choices hers to make. She thought of her past, the years spent caring for her children, the sacrifices she had made. And yet, for all that giving, she had not lost herself. She had simply waited for the right moment to reclaim her power and her voice. Helen closed her eyes, feeling a deep sense of peace. For the first time in decades, she was truly alive, fully present, fully in control, and fully herself.